Dustin Young, Lone Roamer. Today, coming to you from Turkey, California, I'm going to talk about the difference between some short travel bikes I tested, what I liked, what I thought each one did really well, and which one I ultimately chose and bought. And again, all these bikes were either, I got demos, I got, a rep, like a demo rep, or, the manufacturer rep was cool enough to let me borrow. If you could rent bikes right now, I would have rented them. And the bike I bought, I paid for. So just, this is a real user giving you a real review. Nobody's paying me to do these reviews. I'm not being subsidized to do these reviews by the manufacturers. And I didn't get a bike. Oh, I take it back. The bike shop I bought my frame from to build my bike was cool enough to give me $50 off of retail. So South Shore Bikes, South Lake Tahoe, thank you. Super appreciate it. That's it. That's how the whole thing worked out. So when you get this review, it's a real choice. I came down and made a real choice. So hopefully by giving you this information, it helps, because these are bike reviews that you don't have to wonder how much they paid me to say it, and if I meant what I said, which is why I'll tell you the things I do and don't like about the bikes. All right, so Pivot Trail 429 Enduro, Stump Jumper Evo, a little longer travel, so probably was never making it, but it's in there. Norco Optic, Yeti SB130, and an Epic Evo, because the Epic Evo wasn't that far off of the Pivot Trail 429. So it would have been, I compared it to my Mondraker, but you know what? It could stay in the short travel category. I'm not going to get into all the specs. You can go watch all the individual videos. You can get through all the specs. If you really got, you can go in and see all that. Things I do want to cover technically real quick. I got some data here, so you're going to catch me going back and forth, because I just wanted to make sure I give you guys some initial data before I just get into how they ride, what I like, and why I bought the one I bought. 429 Enduro had the most cockpit room. It also had the slack C-tube angle. There's nothing wrong when you get into short travel, a little bit slacker C-tube angle. I know the industry is push steeper. Well, that makes sense. When a bike gets really big travel, that makes a lot of sense. But when they get short, you want a bike that's comfortable, because when you buy a short travel bike, you're probably not shuttling the bike. You're not going to North Star. You're not going to Whistler. You're riding this bike. You're sitting down and pedaling for long periods of time. It needs to be comfortable. So there's a limit to how steep they get before you're probably going to have some comfort issues. And you're also going to start getting a crowded cockpit, and you're going to lose some rear wheel traction, right? Which you want on a short travel bike that you plan on climbing some fun technical stuff with. So don't judge this this slacker C-tube angle as a negative thing, because the Pivot was a great climber. The Stump Jumper is it's always been. We're talking about how many years of a great trail bike. I've owned several Stump Jumpers. I've owned lots of specialized bikes. I learned along the way, and I was curious if it was going to be different, because they have had some intentional geometry changes. But the Stump Jumper still doesn't fit me as well as other bikes. So early, it's out. I didn't buy it. Now, does that mean I thought it was a bad bike? No, it is a fun bike. It is a fast bike. It is a great bike. What I was looking for when I did this comparison is what bike really fits my riding style, and I can do 90% of all my riding on, and not need a different bike to do it. Not start to feel like, oh, I wish I had more travel, or oh, I wish I had less travel, but a great all-around trail bike. That was the end of the day what I was after. And the reason I didn't choose the Stump Jumper, very cross-country in its rear end. They got rid of what made it a little more active bike for the downhill. It did make it a better climber. It had its purpose, but it was a little stiff. It was a little harsh. You noticed it got thrown around a little more in the rock sections, and it sort of got eaten up in a place that I love a bike to perform. So that bike got out. The Yeti SB130, my wife has one. I think they're spectacular bikes. This is a really fast bike. It'll handle a lot. I have a Yeti SB150. That's why the 130 was on the list of trail bikes. What I didn't like, it's riding the razor's edge all the time. This bike is a risk-reward bike. You must hang off the front hard all the time, or it will wash out and have interesting behaviors. It's the way a Yeti is. I love my 150. It is a ripper bike, but there are things you have to pay attention to. It does not like it if you shift your weight back. So if you're tired, I mean, there are reasons you do it. If you're tired, it gets really sketchy. It starts to dislike your behavior, right? But they're real race weapons. It is a bike that is an always-on bike. And I'm a regular rider. We're not always on. We're not always trying to race. Sometimes we're tired and this ride has whooped our butts and it is time we want to chill and just finish getting down. We don't want to feel like we have to fight to be on it. So from that perspective, the 130, while a spectacular bike, it didn't make it either, right? I had a few other bikes in there that I really wanted to test. The Specialized Epic Evo in this. It got the same, it ended up the same as the Stump Jumper. By the way, I think it's a super fun bike. I think this is an incredibly capable bike. There's a lot of cool shit you could do on this bike, but it's not the bike I would buy in this category. It was fun to test, and it definitely still very downcountry, and it lined right up against my downcountry Mondraker, and you know, that was where it was fun to do it. I wouldn't sell my Mondraker for the Epic, totally different video, but it was a lot of fun. The Epic Evo was a cool bike. So what it came down to for me in all these bikes I've ridden and tested was the Trail 429 Enduro and the Norco Optic. These two bikes lined up head to head for me and were the two bikes that I ended up testing. I did the demo and then I got the Optic right behind it so I could get out and get a ride in and know back to back what I was experiencing. And here's what I can tell you about these two bikes for me between the two and how I ended up making a choice and which one I'm now riding. The Trail 429 is the climber's bike that can downhill pretty well. The Norco Optic is the descender's bike that can climb pretty well. The pivot is lighter, the Optic feels more plush. I made a change and set the Optic up in what you'd call an Enduro build like they did for the pivot. So I long forked it. So the pivot is 125, 130 in its native state, and the Norco is 125. So 120, 130, 125, 140. In the Enduro build, which is the pivot I would choose if I were, it's the one that I'm looking at, is 120, 140 in a Fox 36 with a DPX2. The Norco would be a 125 with the Super Deluxe Ultimate DH and a 150 fork, which could be a Pike or anything. Now, the other thing I got to do, and I'm going to do an entire video on this suspension, is I got to also try the pivot with DBO. So I ended up with 125 mil Topaz T3 in the back and 150 mil Diamond D1. The Optic is heavier. In its stock form, the way it comes, it's 31 pounds, 3 ounces, whereas the Trail 429 Enduro is 28.5 pounds. That's pedals on, ready to ride, go for a ride on your bike, water bottle cage attached. None of that marketing stuff. If you've seen other videos, I don't do that. This is with both of them with my Shimano Saint pedals on, because when I'm testing up here in Tahoe, that's what I run, because I want to ride a bigger platform that can support more of the riding I like to do up here. Reach. 10 mil difference in reach. Yep, the pivot definitely had more reach, but the Norco is a more forward geometry bike. It's got shorter chainstays and a longer front end, whereas the pivot has a normal kind of, everybody runs a 17 roughly inch chainstay, but it has a really short front end. So totally different setup for totally different riding styles, right? Again, the Optic is more of the descender's choice, and the 429 Enduro is more of the climber's choice. I love to climb. I like going out and having big days. I don't mind any of it, and I don't need the world's lightest tires on my bike to climb. Now, big climb days, it's nice to have a light trail tire, and you know, that works. I think that if the Trail 429 Enduro was the choice, what you'd find out is I'd take those dissector tires off. I'd give them to a friend. Maybe I wouldn't. That's such a crappy tire. Maybe I wouldn't punish a friend like that. I'd just, you know, take them to the recycler and have them shredded. In that XO casing, you're going to get flats, especially up here in Tahoe. Even in Auburn, because you got so much square edge stuff. I just don't understand that tire. It could be great. It loves to go flat. I know so many people that have pinch flatted that tire. It's just not that tough of a sidewall. It can't take a beating. It can't be ridden hard, which is really interesting because its tread pattern suggests it could. So don't get it. All right. 66 degree head tube angle in the Enduro build, 64.5 degree head tube angle in the optic in an Enduro build. So the optic is a little slacker. 75 degree seat tube angle on the pivot, 76 degree seat tube angle on the optic. Only 5 mil difference of travel in the rear end, only 5 mil, so let's not get too excited. But how they use it was staggeringly different. You can tell that they designed the pivot to go downhill and it feels like it. It had a much higher performance in the chunk. It took bigger drops well. It was hard to bottom out. They did a killer job around all that. That slightly slacker, slightly longer bike definitely can go ride some seriously technical stuff, and you decide you want to go bombing like a psycho through the rock gardens. At some point, it's going to run out of rear travel, not front. Not with 150. You don't have a problem up there. It's the rear of the bike that's finally going to run out. With the pivot, it runs out really early. When you are crushing it downhill, you start to figure out that you are riding in the very bottom of that travel. It feels like it. And in open mode, in the berms, it's wallowy. The optic was never wallowy. Now, as soon as you flip the pivot into trail mode, all that goes away. Mid-stroke was great, and the bike was really fast in the flow because it was that little bit shorter wheelbase, was playful, easier to snap the bike around. Stability, the Norco wins all day long. It's a more stable bike, but the pivot could handle itself pretty well. And you know, stability is comfort, and if you're okay with a little less stability, who cares? It's fast. I mean, it's a little more playful. So, which bike did I choose based on my riding style? The Norco Optic. I love a bike that can handle the rocks and the downhill and everything. And with a DVO Diamond D1 and a Topaz T3, wow, that bike can be railed. Pushed, bashed, railed, ridden, smashed. It is unreal for what it is, for the travel it is. Now, in the build I did, I am running the Schwalbe Magic Mary Super Trails. I'm running We Are One wheels, 30 mil internal rear, 35 mil internal front. It's Axis, it's a SRAM setup. I'm running 1-up bars. I love the bars. 50 mil stem on the thing, Industry 9 hubs. You know, I did make a lot of changes. Axis dropper post. I am running a WTB Volt saddle I've had for quite a while. That's its build. It is super fun. It is a crazy good bike. I hope this really helped. I hope it gave you the differences, because you know what? If I were more of a climber than I am a descender, it would have been the pivot I walked away with. A buddy of mine, I think that's a bike he should go demo. I think it is dead in his wheelhouse for a bike he would love. I'm the opposite. I want a bike that is a trail bike that's fast. It climbs just fine. It's not going to beat the pivot uphill. The pivot's going to smoke its butt, but the optic's going to crush it on the down. And I'm sort of a downhill oriented trail rider, so that was the choice. And it wasn't It was fun to get here. It wasn't easy to decide between a lot of these bikes because I had a really good time. And if you look, I did all these timed runs and they were all close, but ultimately the fastest bike I rode downhill was the Optic in every situation. Some by 20, 30 seconds, some by 5, 6, 7 seconds, but every time it felt more fun, it felt more stable, and it felt like I could push the envelope. It felt like I hadn't found the limits of the bike, whereas I found the limits of the other bikes on the downs. And so I'll just need to get my butt in better shape to push my slightly heavier 32.5-pound bike, because in my build it's heavy with those tires, up those dang hills. So I hope you like this video. Please subscribe to the channel, smash like. I hope this helped you as everyday riders like me get out there and figure out what kind of bike you want. If you're in the hunt for a short travel bike, which one would you buy, right? Where would you end up? They're all killer bikes. You can't go wrong. It isn't like the old days where you could buy a bike you wished you had to buy. It's so hard to buy a bad bike. This comes down to what you love. Really, truly, you're 90%. And I hope I gave you some good information there. Thank you everybody for watching this video. If you're ever out in the Tahoe area, hit me up. You know, I love to ride. Group rides are fun. I am the president of a mountain bike club that I started earlier this year for the Truckee area. So group riding is a thing I love to go do. Got a lot of great friends that love to ride their bikes too. Come out, ride with us, have a good time. I hope to see you out on the trails.